Yeah, perfect. What's up, everybody? It's Matt. Hated that. Here we go. What's up, everybody? Glad to be back with you apart, totally separate in our own homes. It's Matt. I'm here with Jaron, Dan, and Brad. We are starting a new series. Last week, Jaron killed a worship night. We're thankful for that. We're starting a new series, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Hey.
The musical. So each time we talk, we'll be singing for you guys, starting off with Brad this time. It's a musical session. We hope you love this. Honestly, no, that's true. We are talking about Joseph, but this is not a musical, sermon thing. But put in the comments if you want to.
At the end of this series, you'll see Jaron put on a quarantine version of Joseph.
Dude, that would make some money. That would be awesome.
Dude, that'd be wild.
Joseph in the Technicolor face mask.
Yeah, I will still to this day just be like, go, 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 Joe, go, 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 Joe. It doesn't matter, but I'll sing that to random people, and most of them don't know what's happening. Anyways, question to start us off, which is just right in line with what we're talking about. When was the last time you cried? I'll go first because I'm talking. Like a week ago, I watched Onward. Right?
Oh, dude.
End of Onward. Got me, dude. Got me hard. So that was the last time I cried. Onward, great movie. Great movie.
I think about a week and a half ago, I watched that movie too and I cried. But more recently, I cried just because I was feeling real happy. And so I let it out. I said, yo, this is a good tear. Someone let them out.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was good. It was nice. But Onward, that was different, bro. That was a different Disney type movie because it was about the brotherhood, not about like romance or like, it was about
it's kind of like Frozen for brothers rather than, you know what I mean?
That one was for the bros,
Yeah. Hot takes.
Hot take.
Pastor Dan, was last time you cried?
Yeah, the last time someone called me Pastor Dan, I just had enough of it. But yeah, outside of this is not the bro thing, and this is not like just trying to say something gratuitously, but Easter, when Jaron, the song that you led with the rest of the crew, I don't know that I had tears streaming, but like it was a watery eye moment, and it was moving.
There was moisture.
It was really cool. Yeah, there was definite humidity in the Oculus.
Yeah.
Good. No, for me, we just moved Thursday. Thanks for the help with that, Matt. But no, we just moved, and the house we were at over there by the church was the house that is the first house that my wife and I had lived in or purchased together. It was the house that we brought both of our kids home to from the hospital. And on Friday, we closed Friday. I was kind of cleaning out the last couple things, and my family was all at the new house, and I just had a moment where I was sitting kind of standing in the living room, and I was looking at the window. There's a bay window there, and James would always just kind of stand at the ledge and look out the window, and it was like his own little kingdom. And I don't know, I just had a moment where I was just really, really sad because of all the sweet memories there that we're kind of, I don't know, we're closing to. But now that we're in this house and we love it, and it's awesome. So anyway, that is my moment.
Great. Well, thanks guys for sharing. That has literally nothing to do with today, but just thought it'd be interesting. Side note,
I think Joseph cried at some point.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm like a power tear crier. I don't tend to sob, but there's a lot of emotion in each tear. So I can feel it building, and then just one or two tears and it's done. I don't know. I don't know
quality over quantity there.
I'm a quality crier. Perfect. Jaron, I'm gonna send it to you, dude.
All right, I just muted my microphone, so I was okay, I'm being sent to. What's up, guys? I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that my chair's squeaking really loudly and you can hear it really well. We're gonna talk a little bit about some stuff that we talked about last week with the worship night and everything like that. I think it was a good time. It was a good time putting it all together and centering it off and hoping that you guys are able to worship with us. In song and everything like that. I know we've been missing out on that as a Fuse community, as a Fuse fan. And so I'm hoping to do more of that leading forward in the next few weeks after I got all that figured out. So we're hoping to add to that. As always, I'm going to update that playlist, the Music Week Monday, what is it? Midweek music. That's what it is. I have a few different playlists that I have, so I had to figure out which one it was. Midweek music, and yeah, I'll be updating that and checking out those songs there. So yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit about. We're kind of in this space right now that honestly reflects Lent more than Lent did for me. When we had this whole leading up to Easter, the season where Jesus spent 40 days, 40 nights in the wilderness and all that stuff like that. And it's interesting to see that kind of reflected in the time that we are now, because it's post Easter. We had Easter during this time, but to kind of think about how the Lord he took the time to really focus and really understand the beauty in solitude and what it means to be in these spaces. So I encourage you guys to really find the times to go against temptation and to go against kind of where you can fall into in these spaces, and just to understand that this is a time that we can really bear down on what the beauty is that Christ has for us. And last week we talked about how when the Lord came down, he didn't just kind of only abstain and just like say, I'm God, so I don't have to feel the things that you guys do, but his purpose was to come and endure the things that we suffer through in order to have a greater understanding of what it means to be human, and then also to be able to claim victory over that in a more powerful way. And so just think about how this time, if we handle it well, if we find the beauty in these solitary moments, and if we find the beauty in these reflective times, that at the end of it we can look back and say, like, look at the victory that we have over this time, and look how much stronger we are together because of it. And so yeah, that's just my prayer that we can take this time of quarantine, this time of solitude and isolation, even though we are together, we're able to meet in these spaces like this virtually. We're able to sing songs together and all that stuff, that we're able to really be alone in a good way, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm going to pray for us as we go into this time of teaching and kind of hearing from Brad. I believe, Brad, you're talking, right? Yeah, cool. As Brad speaks and everything like that, that we are just able to hear the word, to hear the comfort of what God's got for us in this moment. So, Lord God, we thank you so much that we are not alone, that we are together, that we are just with you, that we are able to spend this time not in mourning all the time, and not in despair, but we are able to lift you up within our solitude, and we are able to lift you up in these spaces that we get to live. We are able to spend more time with our family, maybe grow closer, grow bonds with each other in that way. But we are also given the opportunity to reach out to each other, to show us and each other how much we care, how much we love each other, how much we respect and appreciate one another as well. So Lord God, please pour into us as we spend this time listening to your teaching, listening to your word. At your great name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Jaron.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing everything you do with the music side of things. Last week was awesome. I took the week off, but I was still able to kind of catch in and just kind of reflect on that and watch. And so anyway, really cool. Thank you for joining us. So we are going to jump in, as we kind of talked about. We are starting a new series, and it's on the life of Joseph. Now, this is Joseph in the Old Testament, not Joseph in the New Testament. All right. It's a 5-week series. We've added an intro week, though. So it's actually a 6-week series. We've done this for 2 reasons. One, want to provide a little bit of context. We don't want to just jump into this big story and not really know what's going on. And secondly, we didn't want this first video to be an hour long, right? We wanted it to be short. And so we wanted to just kind of give your groups a chance to have good conversations, and also to really recognize and draw some parallels to the things that this series hits on, but also the things that we're experiencing right now as a community. And so here's where we're going today. We're going to talk kind of an overview of the series a little bit. What's it called? Why is it called that? What are we looking at? Secondly, we're going to provide just a little bit of context. So what was going on in the bigger story that surrounds this story? So when we look at the book of Genesis, when we look at the Bible, we look at the story of Joseph, like, what's going on? Why does it even matter? And then the third thing we're going to talk about is, why is this particular series relevant to us right now and what we're experiencing. So starting out, big picture. That is what this series is called. It's called Big Picture. A lot of times, right, in life, we find ourselves in situations where there is more that's going on than meets the eye. There's more that's happening than we can actually see. We see this on social media all the time, right? If you're on Instagram, you see a picture of somebody experiencing something or doing something, and your mind jumps to all of these assumptions about what their life is like or what they're experiencing or what they're doing. And you really don't actually know what's going on in that moment. One of my favorite things to find or see on Instagram or on a website will be like a picture of like someone like on the beach posing, right? And like a picture of the person who's taking a picture of the person posing, and it's like, you look ridiculous. And this whole, like, everything else, like all that was that comes across in the first picture is someone with the sunset on the beach with the ocean. And then like you pull it out and there's like 50 people who are all, posing in front of the same ocean, same beach. You don't get that, right? Well, we experience that in life all the time. And I think that a lot of times we are wired, right, to think about this. Like we're wired to only feel what we're feeling or see what we're experiencing. And like, it's just really hard to step back and to kind of get a grasp of the bigger picture, the bigger thing that's actually happening. It's hard to adopt a greater perspective. So I wanted to ask you guys a question, Dan and Matt. And before I ask you to answer, I will answer myself, give you guys a little bit of a chance to think. But are there any situations that come to your mind personally where you were so involved with something, or you're so close to a situation where it made it really difficult for you to step back and see the bigger picture that was happening? For me, my first year in grad school. So I graduated college in 2011. Yeah, 2011. And I came home to go to grad school here in St. Louis. And my first year of grad school, I was working custodial. So I came back to Calvary. I talked with my former employer, my former boss, Mike G. And he's like, yeah, I got a job for you. You can work custodial like, you used to. But here's the thing. You're going to be working overnight. And at the time, I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm going to have to go to grad school during the day and then work overnight janitorial shifts. Like, how is this even going to work? I was so tired all the time. Like, there are classes that I would just sit in and just like totally like black out. Like, I wouldn't even know what happened. But like, I reflect on that year and like, man, God taught me so much. He taught me so much about like what it means to be faithful, to be consistent, to be a hard worker. He taught me about, the importance of doing things that just sucked. But in addition to that, working overnights, it allowed me to work more hours than I would have been able to had I not worked overnights, had I worked, just regular hours somewhere. And also my wife and I had just started dating, and we had spent, she was in college still and had like 2 classes. And so she was able to stay up super late because it didn't matter. So she didn't have class until 11. And I would just be, walking around the church, with my earbuds in, cleaning toilets, cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming. And we would just be talking the whole time. And it was really like, looking back on it, man, it was such a blessing that was just kind of like disguised as this just like, I don't know, this really just unfortunate thing. I didn't want to work overnights, but it really allowed me some opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So anyway, that's me. Dan, Matt, anything come to mind when you think about, a time in your life where maybe it was really difficult for you to kind of step back and see the bigger picture during something?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys both were athletes, but like when I was in a sport, everything else kind of like blacked out around me. So like in wrestling, I could never hear anything except one coach's voice and my own breathing, right? And this transferred into when I started like doing like CrossFit type workouts and competitions. There was this workout where I couldn't hear or see anything. I was so focused in on this movement. And the only issue was like Jake and I were on a team. And so it was this long workout. I was exhausted. I couldn't breathe. And we were supposed to take turns going back and forth, cleaning and jerking this weight. And I was just sitting there for like 30 seconds, like waiting for him to say, okay, your turn. But he was saying, okay, your turn, like 15 times, yelling at me. But because I didn't move and I was so focused in on my like exhaustion, he just yelled. And so, yeah, that's fine.
Nice. Yeah, so I've played baseball all my life, and I got to play for St. Charles West, so this is 98, 99, 2000, 2001. So, I did the path. I played freshman ball, JV ball, was on the varsity team my junior year, and then my senior year came, and I wasn't like ever stellar, but I could hang, and I was like one of those nothing flashy kind of players, but I made good baseball happen. And so Matt was 5 years old when I started high school. Awesome. So back on track. Okay, here we go. So my senior year comes, and there's a new varsity coach that's moves up, and I had known him as a JV coach, but when he comes in, he's got big plans. And part of his big plans included developing younger players that were going to probably do more than me. Like, in fairness, like I saw the value of his coaching move, but it was really hard on me because I sat the bench a lot my senior year. I was identified as like a team leader, as somebody to emulate, but I was not in the field, and I was put in late in games, and I had these challenges. I was working on my game. There was a few things that really needed to improve. It was hard. I had friends coming up and being like, hey, why isn't coach playing you more? What's going on? And so what I decided that I needed to do is do my very best and trust God. And long story short, I went to college the next year. And when I got to college, I tried out for a team. I'm so sorry. My daughters are like yelling right now. Hi, everyone. Hazel and Lily, say hello. Anyway, long story short, and then I'll get this thing muted. I got to college. That school started a team that year, and I ended up playing and starting every game but 2 games for the next 2 years at that school, in large part because of how hard I had to work just to try to get the playing time I could in high school. So I couldn't see it at the time. It sucked when I was in high school, but it turned out awesome in that I was ready to play at a different level the next year.
Man, those are great examples. I love it when we get to talk about sports in church. What do you guys think are some things that make it challenging, right, to like see the bigger picture in any situation?
For me, it's always like emotion and stress. Like if I'm highly emotionally invested into something, it's really hard for me to see outside of like my blinders, And that was especially for like wrestling. I was honed in, like every ounce of my being was focused on this. And so like I just practically had horse blinders. And so for me, like high emotion or high stress tend to really hone me in on like a very narrow vision-esque, I guess.
Yeah. I have a quick story that kind of illustrates what happens when you just a way like a situation can take your eyes off the bigger picture. I was playing paintball when I was younger, and I have this one vivid memory. I'm marching down this hill. I got my gun, and all of a sudden, out of somewhere I cannot tell where, these paintballs start flying by me. It looked like a scene in a movie, and there's some turret down. Anyway, it freaked me out. We were playing at night. This place had a light up system, and when those paintballs start flying, I start breathing so heavy, my mask completely fogs over to the point that I turn around, I start running uphill, and I don't see that I'm running straight at a tree that's about that big. Wham! It just sits me down on my rear end, and like somehow I didn't get shot in the middle of all this. But sometimes it's not because we're doing something wrong we lose sight of the big picture. Sometimes it's just because what's happening becomes so consuming, like it's tough to keep big perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also think we're so wired to just think about ourselves, right? And like, hey, how does this thing affect me? How am I feeling about this? I think like in our culture, society, like we're wired to create these environments of comfort, and anything that challenges that is something that's really difficult. We also it's hard to assume that other people have like our best interests in mind, right? So we question other people's motivations, and then it's okay. Well, I got to secure, this for me, because no one else is going to do it for me. And I think that oftentimes, like whenever it comes to like matters of faith or matters of how God is working in this world, a lot of times we can't actually know or fully see all of the ways that he was working until a situation is over, right? Like the benefit of hindsight. Well, in this series, we're going to actually be looking at this guy named Joseph. And if you've grown up in the church, like you probably have heard his story, you know who, you know, some of the things that he has done. But like this guy, man, he has all of these different circumstances and these different situations that they weren't just isolated events. They might have seemed like it, but they weren't, right? Every step of the way, God was doing something, and he was leading Joseph to be part of something that was bigger than he ever could have realized, even in the moment. So let's move on to our second point, like just talking about context of this new series, right? And this guy named Joseph. We don't want to just dive into the story without having any sort of understanding of, you know, what's going on, what else is happening in this. And so the account of Joseph, it's his life is found in Genesis. It's the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 37 through 50. He gets 14 chapters, right, of the first book of the Bible devoted to him. Like that's a ton, right? That's more than most people in the Bible, right? It's a big freaking deal. His life was incredibly important to the history of God's people. But we don't want this to be just a history lesson, even though I would love to just like cite history, you know, biblical Old Testament narrative to y'all. If that is your thing, there are, if you go to YouTube, the Bible Project, there's 2 videos about the book of Genesis. They're excellent. And the second video is a lot of it has to do with the life of Joseph. So we'll put links to both of those videos in the description. It would be really helpful for you to go and watch those videos and to listen and to really help grow your understanding of what is going on in the book of Genesis. I don't know, maybe Jaron can find a fancy way to embed the video or put an overlay. I don't know, maybe like right here. We'll see if that works. Anyway, life of Joseph, person of Joseph. We all 3 of us, we grew up going to church. What do we know about Joseph? What stands out when you guys think about his life? Like what sticks out to you? Whether, you know, it could be something simple or I don't know, something profound, whatever.
I always just think about Joseph as just resilient, you know, like maybe tenacious is the word. Like he doesn't give up. He doesn't stop moving. He always keeps moving forward. And like, he does get a ton of the scripture, right? A ton of Genesis. And it doesn't record every action he does, but it's interesting that you never catch him complaining. I'm sure at some point he, being human, probably complained, but I think if that was a part of his character, a part of his like personness, if that was a big part of him, I think we would know about that. I think that would be in the scriptures. And for that not to be there, I think is a shout out to him, is an interesting aspect of him because of everything he goes through over and over and over again. And to just, in a way, like be a man through it all and be tenacious and to keep moving forward, I think is honorable.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I really like how like God uses Joseph to take care of a lot of people that he could have never imagined. I mean, I'm guessing we're going to back up a little bit here and talk about, you know, how he even winds up in Egypt. But the fact that he's in Egypt and he starts serving for the, you know, the ruler in the land, and then God uses him to come up with a very wise way to see an entire nation through famine and eventually his own family. Like it says a lot about, what's that? There's a song from Frozen, and I think we're going to hit it in like week 3 or 4 or 5, but it says, just do the next right thing. Like yeah. Joseph never let the small parts of his circumstance take his eyes off of the big picture that God intended to bless the world through him and his family. And it's amazing.
Yeah. Joseph, he's a stud. I think that if anything, like he gets like I said, he gets like 14 chapters of the book of Genesis, but if anything, like he is an underrated player when it comes to like, hey, who's your favorite character in the Bible or person in scripture, right? Like, man, God used him in so many ways. And he took him from this like bragging 17-year-old, right, who just tattled on his brothers. I don't know if any of you know anyone like that, right? Like to this like second in command in the nation of Egypt, right? Like, man, talk about a pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, like rags to riches. Like, man, like he's an incredible person, right? And he has an incredible story. It's really compelling. But I think to properly understand all the things that, because like even in the life of Joseph, what's clear is not like he is not the hero, right? Like God is. God keeps putting him in these weird places, and he'll find himself receiving blessing and praise and favor, and then he'll do something to screw it up, right? Or someone else does something that screws it up for him, and then he finds himself in a situation that's like so much worse. Like we'll see here in a couple weeks, like he goes from being like the favorite kid to having his brothers throw him in a pit and sell him into slavery, and then he finds himself in Egypt, right? And then he works his way up to managing this high officials like whole household, and then he gets accused of something that he doesn't do, and then he gets thrown in jail, and then he works himself back up because he finds favor with the king. Like he's just got this roller coaster of a story that I'm sure if I'm Joseph, I'm like, man, this doesn't even make sense. And then at the end, right, we find that his whole story was just to explain to God's people how they wound up in slavery in Egypt. And that's the cool thing that God is doing here, right? Because if we back up to the beginning of Genesis, what we have here is we have a story that's written to a particular group of people. It's written to this nation of Israel who is coming out of slavery in Egypt. And this group of people, they have all these questions about the world, right? Like, hey, who are we, right? Our entire identity was we're slaves. And so God uses this guy named Moses to write kind of a history of his people. And it's a history not just of his people, but it's a history of God and his activity in the world and the ways that he has taken and created all things. And then mankind screwed that up, right? And so, but God's still rich in mercy, full in love, right? He still loves his creation. And so he designs all these different ways to redeem, to restore, to fix, like all these brokenness. So he chooses a person, right? This guy named Abram, right? And he says, hey, listen, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to take what I was going to do in Genesis 1 and fill the whole world with my character. I'm going to choose you, and I'm going to bless you. And the people that you come encounter with, they're going to be blessed by you. And people are going to know me because of you. And he makes promises to Abram, and Abram's family grows, and he has a son named Isaac, and those same promises and blessings are passed on. And that Isaac has a son named Jacob, and Jacob has a son named Joseph. And so Joseph, his whole life, it's the next step in this bigger story that God is working and doing to fix and to restore and to redeem all things. And so that's really what's happening in the book of Genesis. That's what's happening with the life of Joseph. And Joseph's life is just a snapshot of how God works, I think, in each of our lives, right? Everything that we experience is just a small step forward in the trajectory in what he is doing. So I wanted to kind of move on, because before we kind of dive in next week specifically and look at a few of the different accounts, I do think that this particular series is uniquely relevant to what we're kind of experiencing, because we're kind of all in this thing together, this whole quarantine, this whole coronavirus thing. We're separated, in it. Our experience is probably not a whole lot of fun most of the time, at least compared to regular life. Now, I am not equating quarantine with the slavery of God's people in Egypt, right? I am not equating quarantine with being sold by your brothers into slavery, right? But I do think that there's things going on maybe in our current situation that cause it to be difficult to see maybe what God is doing in the bigger picture of this whole thing. So with that being said, I want to just kick it back to you guys. What has quarantine life been like for you? What has been frustrating? What has been challenging? What is something that God has been maybe teaching you during this?
Yeah, quarantine life is strange. I shared, not right here, but I find it almost deceitful in that it seems like since we're home, there should be so much rest and so much just sheer enjoyment, and not, like, it should be amazing, and yet it's not. Like, it's so, if left alone and not pursued well and thought through fully and not intentional with our time, it's folly. Like, it can be easy to just let days go by, to not be wrestled, to not engage with people, to like, it's such a weird, like, I don't know, like a fake vacation in a way. Like, it seems like, oh, we're just gonna work from home, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna be so wrestle, and it's not unless you intentionally pursue these things. And so that's what I found. And like, I also think that's important, just to like grieve what needs to be grieved, to not just let those buried emotions sit there. So like Easter, grieving not gathering together, grieving not being able to celebrate my grandpa's birthday, like grieving all these different things that we like are missing because of this thingy-mabob.
Yeah, I just miss people. I'm kind of an extrovert that just likes meeting people and figuring out, what do I have in common with them. This year has been a year of change. I got to join Calvary and Fuse, and that's been awesome. And so, like, part of like what I miss for me is some of the stuff of like, I just learning who some of y'all are that are watching, and knowing what your story is. I miss the Vine like crazy. I had this very somber moment. Made a fire last week, cooking s'mores with my girls, and it took me back to just a few weeks before that. The Vine had been over. We had a fire going outside, and then my mind went even farther back to when we were hiking last fall, and I was just like, dang, like I just miss that stuff, like building memories. I do feel like what I've been learning though, I guess has been similar, and it's been through other people, which is cool. And I think that's one way that I see that as God growing me, helping me. I've learned from some people who are very intentional about connecting with others. So like, y'all don't know my sister, but my sister's someone who has, and actually my mom deserves a ton of credit. Like, they've made sure the family keeps in touch. And then there's a couple of friends from the Vine, and that there's a couple of seniors actually out of Fuse that are really amazing at staying connected. And so like their example and interacting with them and y'all, like that's been a real gift to me, and it's helped me see like I always knew that like church, the stuff church does, it's not about the programs, it's always about the people. It's kind of beautiful, even though it's hard, to like all we can do is be like chasing after each other and people and building friendships and relationships. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that's been the hardest or most challenging is like I feel bad for my kids because they're all cooped up. Like on one hand, they get more of me now. They get more of my wife now because we're not dropping them off at daycare. We're not taking them to, just drop them off at my parents. Like we're with them all the time. And that's really cool. But at the same time, like they're not getting all of us. And so they're just cooped up. And so like I find myself like almost getting frustrated that, man, my kids like are being deprived of the things that they really enjoy and love doing. I find myself like getting like I am so bummed that I don't get to watch baseball right now, right? Like that's just a personal, like I don't know, I feel entitled to it almost, right? Like it just stinks. We we moved last week, and I think I got the truck at 8 a.m. Monday or Thursday morning, and I returned it at 1 a.m. Thursday night because I couldn't get, I couldn't even ask a bunch of people to come help because of the whole coronavirus thing. And like, we can't have a housewarming party, right? Things that like would just be a whole lot of fun. And I think that like, we're not alone in these frustrations or challenges, but because we're the ones that are feeling them and we don't have community like with us to share in those frustrations or challenges, it makes it really difficult. And I can only imagine like some of these things that Joseph had to do, like he was going through it by himself. And so I don't know, maybe that's one of my encouragements or my challenges is like, hey, who do you need to reach out to? Who do you need to just share with that? Like, hey, this has been really challenging. This has been really, really frustrating. I want to give a shout out to Caleb Little real quick here. He wrote a song last week. He put it on his YouTube channel, and like, man, he was just really honest in it about like things that this thing has been causing him to feel. And I really appreciate his honesty in that, because I do know that like a lot of our seniors, right? You guys, like you probably feel like you're getting screwed out of a lot of just, experiences that you deserve and that you're entitled to. And like, that's probably a fair feeling on your part. And so I guess my question though is how do we take a step back? Like, how can we even look for ways in these moments that God is working? Like, what is the bigger picture in all of this? And some of it we don't know. Some of it we may never know, right? Like, we may never know how many lives are saved by us having to experience and do these different things, right? Like with Joseph and his story, like there are numbers there, right? There are numbers of people who, were in slavery in Egypt who maybe would have died, right, in the famine that went through Israel. Like, we may never know, right, what God has done fully throughout this. But I would encourage us of this: if there are stories that we come across, like, let's share them with other people. Let's share them with other people of ways that God is working during this. So I don't know. I want to just kick that back to you guys real quick. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like what might be the bigger picture here?
Dude, that's a tough one. What might be the bigger picture? I've been kind of wrestling with family unity is the thing I think of most. Like, just in its weirdness, like, I read an article the other day that like divorces in New York like skyrocketed, like, and that is like the opposite of family unity, and so now that we're all thrown in these opportunities together, now that we are stuck with each other, like, am I going to be intentional with my wife? Like, am I going to pursue her needs over my own? Am I going to do the things that make her feel comfortable first before I do my own? Like, it is an opportunity, I think, for family growth and for relational growth within the family unit. Well, that's not all, but that's the thing I think most likely is part of it.
Cool.
I think that I like, all right, so forgive me, I'm going to try to put myself in students' shoes. And I think that, so students, like, be gracious here. Like, take the correction, and yes, your feelings are valid. Like, whatever you would correct in what I'm about to say. But I think for a lot of students that, it's spring semester, it's running down to the end. There's a lot of things that are commitments and pressures that you kind of go along with. And not all of them are bad. But it does feel like, yeah, God's kind of put or allowed our entire area to go on this pause, that it's not just like a vacation pause of like step outside, enter back in. It's like a big pause. And I think that a lot of the good that's happening is people are asking, like, what really matters about a Monday as compared to a Thursday, And I don't like students. I don't expect any of y'all to be like, well, here's exactly my schedule, and this is why this day. That's not my point. My point is, though, like, yeah, you're doing things to kill time, but maybe God's got you. Maybe you love certain things for a reason. Like, maybe you play video games because it's a way to connect, and maybe that connection is what you or somebody else needs. And so maybe you've gotten to step out of some friendships that aren't real great, and you've gotten to put those kind of on hold in a good way, but you've been able to step in selectively with some great friendships. And those might be friends you'll have for the rest of your life. Or like Matt said, maybe things were hard, and maybe they are hard with family, but maybe that's okay, because maybe you guys can work some of that out, by God's grace. And maybe that becomes a real strength down the road, So, like, I'm projecting, I'm trying to imagine, but I would guess anything that someone says, this is what's hard, is probably a place where God in them is trying to grow them, and help them develop.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I do think that, like, without the benefit of hindsight yet, we don't fully know what all God is going to do during this season, how he's going to use it. But it's really easy to just focus on, this is how this thing is affecting me. And so I would say, be eager to ask other people, how is this affecting you? Right? That's just a very simple thing we can do. How are you being affected by this? And oftentimes when we ask that question, we can learn about how we can pray for someone else. We can even have our eyes open to, man, it's affecting them like this. It's affecting me like this. Man, this whole thing really really stinks, but we're still kind of weirdly in this thing together. So maybe there's an appreciation even that comes for the larger community as we do that. So anyway, we're super excited about this series. I'm excited for the ways that God is going to use it. I love the story of Joseph. I love where he came from, where he went, how God kind of orchestrated things. And then at the end of the story in Genesis 50, verse 20, it says this, as for you, you meant evil against me. This is Joseph speaking to his brothers, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So I don't know. We never fully know how God is going to use this thing, like this virus thing, this whatever. You could think about like, okay, can you rephrase this? The enemy, right? Satan, the devil, brokenness, evil, right? All of these things, right? Like are meant to, hey, look how bad you're going to make this thing for us. And I don't know, maybe God is going to do good through it. So anyway, Dan, I'll kick it to you. You can close us out.
Yeah. Y'all, we wanted to leave you with one thing to pray, one thing to do, and one thing to reflect on. And really, the conversation's already taken us there, I think. Again, feel free to edit. You're brilliant in your own way. So, but to pray, do, and reflect. So I would say to pray and ask God to help you see where he's working in your life, and yeah, just pray that like kind of open hands, like, God, help me see, open my eyes, help me see, clear the fog away. What trees am I about to smack my face into would be my version of that prayer. But one thing to do, you heard it from Brad, reach out to somebody. And like, if you look at it like circles, you got your friends who you're connected to right now and your family members who you're connected to, for sure, no question. But then like, what's that second or third circle? Who's that person that you were kind of starting to get to know at school, or you've got to like, just reach out and tell them you're thinking about them. And yeah, I love that. Just ask them how all this is affecting them. This is a unique time. You don't have to start conversation. All you got to do is ask, how is this for you? And you'll get someone's honest response. So pray, God, show me what you're doing in my heart, in my life. Do reach out to somebody, and then reflect on. I think that, Brad, what was that reference again?
Genesis 50, verse 20.
All right, read Genesis 50, verse 20, and think about all the implications of that. And as you learn more about the life of Joseph over this next week and the way God works in his heart and life and through him, like, I think that that'll continue to take on meaning. But start now. Start reflecting on what does that mean, that what you meant for evil, God has been able to use for good and to bless a lot of people through that. There's just a lot to unpack in there. So pray, God, what are you doing in my life? Do reach out and reflect on Genesis 50:20. What does all that mean? Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.